This is episode 337 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Wally, it is not news to say that we knew the governor was going to, at very least, extend her edicts on wearing masks indoors. And that's exactly what she did. Now, that rule imposed by our dear leader, Michelle Lujan Grisham, is in effect until at least October the 15th. And
2021 or 2022 or 2023. I have a feeling we're going to be masking it up all through the winter. I won't say you heard it first, but that's my unsolicited speculation on that point. So,
well, my kids are still masking it up, so to speak, in school. And quite frankly, that bugs me a heck of a lot more than me having to occasionally wear a mask inside. I say occasionally because sometimes I feel a little frisky and just go naked, at least mask naked, that is. And, it's something that the enforcement, I think, is way down. I think people have realized the effectiveness or lack of effectiveness of masking. It's pretty hard to ascertain over the many moons of COVID-19 that such policies have a great deal of effectiveness. New Mexico had been going through an uptick in the virus. We do have high vaccination rates, and those, I'm sure, helped us uh, do better than some other states. But the masks in that aspect really are more for show than anything else.
yeah, and Paul, you're seeing just almost daily. There'll be the video or the pictures of the politicians there for the cameras with the masks on in lockstep, and then the minute they think they're off, they take them off and start visiting, just like nothing happens. So there is a definitely a theatrical element to this mask wearing, at least as it stands right now.
Yeah, of course, at the Met Gala a week or two ago, AOC and her cohorts, Hollywood celebs, there partying while all the help wears masks. You've got the San Francisco mayor partying, going to some concert without a mask on, and it is truly a day-to-day occurrence. The Emmy Awards, no masks. It just I, we could spend the entire show talking just about the hypocrisy of the masking classes or the mandate for masking classes, but that wouldn't be a very interesting show. We could do quite a bit though. So we'll move on, and just safe to say that the COVID situation kind of grinds on, and we'll have another update on the masking order in October. But I am right there with you. I assume that unless something changes markedly, we'll be wearing masks indoors here in New Mexico, and God knows when kids will be allowed to unmask themselves in New Mexico classrooms. Now, some better news, I guess. Certainly better news for the bottom line of the state of New Mexico. Natural gas prices hit the highest level in 12 years recently. They call it the Henry Hub. I don't know who Henry was or what hub he's got, but that is how natural gas is priced at dollars per million cubic feet, or even millions of BTUs. And they seem to be kind of the same thing there, but $5.39 as of recently here in September, which that sounds like a pretty low price, but compared to $1.50, where it was a few weeks ago, months ago, I should say, natural gas has risen tremendously. And I don't know, Wally, you follow these things pretty closely. I know demand is up For electricity, natural gas has been used to replace coal a lot of places, including around the globe. Uh, there's been some supply disruptions, maybe with the hurricanes, but this is pretty big news for the state budget.
Yeah, it is in the short term big news, and that the higher price commodity will generate higher severance taxes and higher royalties to the extent that it's on state land or federal land. All of the royalties on state land go to the state of New Mexico, and like 48%, give or take, of federal royalties come back to the state of New Mexico. The other thing that's going to be interesting to look at is, the price of natural gas has been so low for so long. There's been virtually no drilling in the San Juan Basin, which is predominantly a natural gas basin. There are some oil formations kind of on the southern portion of the basin that have been developed, but about the only drilling that has been going on for the past several years are companies that have needed to drill to hold leases. A lot of leases have a term in there where you have to drill a well in so long a period, or else the lease goes away. And that's in all different kinds of leases, no matter who it is. And so, if this price stays in the $5, $6, heaven forbid, $7 range for a sustained period of time, to where people think that price might be sustainable, we could see some additional drilling activity up there in the San Juan Basin.
Mm-hmm.
The Permian Basin produces a lot of oil. I mean, it's a lot of natural gas, but it's associated gas, meaning the economics that have primarily driven have been the economics of oil, and anything you could make out of natural gas was kind of gravy to offset the fact that you had to build gathering lines to extend to take that gas away to market. But it was more of a hindrance than a big profit maker. But yes, this could be very interesting. Back when Governor Richardson was governor, natural gas prices and natural gas drove the oil and gas industry. Gas was high, oil was low.
Mm-hmm.
We could be seeing a period where natural gas is high and oil is relatively high, in which case the money will flow into Mexico, at least for the time being. But yeah, it's very interesting how long natural gas has been at very, very constrained levels price wise. And then one final point just to make is the Henry Hub, which is in Oklahoma, is the pricing point. That price of whatever it is, $5 an MMBTU or a MMCF, whichever it's priced at, and they're pretty close to the same. If there's a little difference. One is a volume, one is a heat factor or an energy factor, but that price isn't the price that you get in the San Juan Basin. You have to pay money to get your cows to market, or in this case, your natural gas to market. So the net profit back, or the net revenue back to a San Juan producer is, definitely lower, not necessarily by dollars, but multiples. It's not just a few cents. It's a lot of money. So the economics is constrained there a little bit. But yeah, this offers maybe a relatively unprecedented opportunity for oil and gas, New Mexico's two most beloved commodities, to lead the way.
So, according to the Legislative Finance Committee, they have a rule of thumb, which is kind of a funny thing for a group like the LFC because they aspire to be so accurate.
Yes.
But the rule of thumb is that a 10-cent increase in the price per 1,000 cubic feet of natural gas translates into $15 million in additional revenue. So, when you're at $1.50 and you're going up to $5.50 or 40 cents, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, you're getting close to $100 million.
So New Mexico's prices are very revenues are very sensitive to natural gas. Now, I was just when you were talking about the price of natural gas and what's going on, back on September 15th, so we're talking just under a week ago, prices hit that 556, 557 per MCF. It's already down to 484. So it's a pretty significant drop. I mean, these prices are volatile, but I think what a lot of folks are looking at is normally this is something that happens, the price spikes during winter, especially cold snaps, because you're doing both home heating and electricity generation with the natural gas. And we'll see what happens, but it's been a while since natural gas prices or even policies around that were a major consideration. It's been pretty much forgotten as New Mexico's boomed in terms of its oil production capabilities. And actually, I saw a article that formally recognized New Mexico has passed North Dakota as the second leading producer of oil in the country. So we're firing on all cylinders, so to speak, when it comes to producing these two very important commodities. Now, sticking with energy, but moving towards the electrical grid, was forwarded a report from an outfit called Choose Energy. I'm not sure what other things you would choose, but choosing energy.
Well, if you believe Einstein, all you can choose is mass, energy, or the speed of light. So it's got to be one of those three.
But these folks did a very interesting report that I had not seen before. And another topic I know you know a little bit about, Wally, is electricity generation. And these folks look at the mix of electricity generation for all 50 states. I pulled out and further analyzed a few kind of interesting states nearby to New Mexico. California, because that is our governors and our legislatures' guiding light, seemingly, on electricity policy. We have, of course, New Mexico, Texas, and then Arizona, both neighboring states. And Texas, of course, their electricity generation prowess was very much called into question just this past winter. If you go through this data, and my first, the spidey senses start tingling when I look at the total electricity generated. Now, California has a population that's about a third to a quarter bigger than Texas. But in terms of total electricity generated, they're at about 18,400 megawatt hours. Texas is at 46,000 megawatt hours. That's a really big disparity in favor of the state with less people in it, which implies to me that California is importing quite a bit of their electricity from surrounding states. New Mexico is a third of Arizona, which is actually about on par with our population, which is an illustration of Arizona being the more free market, better run state economically. But I digress. Now, California gets basically none of its electricity at this point from coal, which is fascinating by itself. New Mexico gets about 38% from coal, 0 from hydro, which isn't a surprise. We don't have enough water.
It's not 0, but it's close enough. I'll give it to him. It's a rounding
That's
error.
what Choose Energy says, so I'm going with that. And we get 0 from nuclear. Now, remember, this is in-state generation.
Yeah.
So
we consume nuclear because
consume
P&M
nuclear,
has been
right.
an owner or a lessor of Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station near Phoenix. So.
Exactly, which P&M is attempting to get out of, and that's going to be a whole different kettle of fish, so to speak. New Mexico actually gets less from natural gas, less of its electricity from natural gas than any of the states I mentioned, more from coal currently, and we'll see. That's going to be an interesting situation as it develops. I said 38%. Texas is 20. Arizona's 13. Like I said, California 0 from coal. California is heavily reliant on natural gas, 47%, 33% in New Mexico, 53% in Texas, and 46% in Arizona. We, like I said, nuclear, the other states have more. Arizona considerably more, 26.7. I'm assuming that's pretty much all Palo Verde. California, 31% from solar. The rest of them, single digits, or Arizona's 10%. And anyway, so The report from Choose Energy essentially notes that California gets 46% of its electricity from renewables. We're at 29.6, and Texas is 19.6, Arizona 16.2. Uh, just a, and I assume, and I think the real interesting thing, and it's the difficult thing, to figure out how much you actually consume of those various generation sources, because New Mexico right now is very much in the business and getting further into the business of producing wind and solar predominantly for the California market. And I think every Western state, to an extent, is in that business right now. But what does California actually consume? Where is it really getting those electrons? It's tough when you put it on the grid. It kind of gets all lumped in together. Nobody has a little tracking mechanism. So this is just from a production standpoint, but it is interesting, and I wanted to make sure folks knew about it.
Yes, and just like a public service company in New Mexico owns a piece of Palo Verde, the nuclear plant, Four Corners Generating Station, San Juan Generating Station, our San Juan is P&M's around 50%, give or take, as I recall. But Four Corners, most of that power goes into Arizona and elsewhere. And so the point is, and this is kind of tying the first part of the show on natural gas prices together, is these coal plants, start to leave, right now, the state of battery and renewable technology is such that there's nothing else really other than natural gas. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens to the price of natural gas. The other thing that, frankly, I really don't know is as new plants come on, you have the ability sometimes to get into long-term contracts at a price with natural gas suppliers. This has happened back the first time in the 70s when natural gas was a big part, and there were things called like take or pay contracts where you have to pay whether or not you take the natural gas for the privilege of having that available for you for generating your electricity. It seems like those have kind of gone away. But as things switch and there is no other alternative really other than natural gas for reliable, dispatchable energy to replace coal, at least in the short term. And I'll call the short term, I'll give a definition, which means I can't be an economics professor. I'll call the short term 20 years that, this transition under things like the Energy Transition Act will really be a number of years, and I think a number of decades. So.
Yeah, it is going to be an interesting thing to watch, and Lord knows we have plenty of moving parts in New Mexico's utility industry that we're trying to keep track of, and P&M is trying to keep the lights on while complying with all of these different rules and regulations. And I think the rubber starts to really hit the road next summer when, under the Energy Transition Act, the San Juan Generating Station, which is much more of a New Mexico oriented producer of electricity, when that shuts down. And when that shuts down, P&M has said, we're not really sure where we're going to get all the electricity we need to keep the lights on in New Mexico. And, it strikes me, both based on the natural gas that we produce as a state, as well as just the overall environmental benefit of transitioning to natural gas, that it would have been wise under the ETA to make that a initial step towards getting our grid cleaner, while also doing it in a more consistent way with the technology of the day. Natural gas is half the CO2 of coal, and whether you think global warming is a clear and present danger or something that you're not particularly concerned about, certainly natural gas has been plentiful. And it's not that we don't have access to the natural gas, as you say. It's a matter of if the price getting to a certain point that we actually have people going out and finding it, not just as the component of oil production. So the Four Corners would still love to see, our friends up in the Farmington area would love to see the price of natural gas go a little higher. But that could really put a stick in the works when it comes to people who have built these electricity plants under the assumption that we're going to have cheap natural gas for the foreseeable future. And I don't want to overstate things. $4 and $5 isn't a huge deal. Life will go on, and it's just a matter of will we have really, really cheap natural gas or relatively cheap natural gas. And right now we're moving out of the super cheap to relatively cheap.
Yeah, and then the other wild card in this is equation is companies like Enchant Energy, and there's others that are looking at putting carbon capture technology on coal plants, and those coal plants with carbon capture technology actually produce a lot less carbon dioxide per megawatt hour than natural gas. Now, will they get that done? There are challenges, but those projects are working. Not only at San Juan Generating Station, but plans for other coal-fired plants around the western U.S. And that could, interestingly, be something that if that happens, maybe it takes a little bit of pressure off of natural gas, which is still going to be huge by any stretch of the imagination during this transition period to generate electricity. Yeah, a lot of dynamics. Paul, it's a little bit like predicting the stock market. When's it going to stop going up and when's it going to start going down? If you could do that with any degree of certainty, you don't need to be in the market very long to become a millionaire or billionaire. Same thing with energy prices. It's volatile. There's a lot of factors, and it's amazing how things that thought could never occur end up occurring. And I harken back to the 2007 and 8 when the recession was caused by oil prices in the $140, $150 range. And you were seeing people that said, oh, oil prices will never be low again. And, lo and behold, 3 months later, they crash and things are much different. And so just in the last 2 years, we've seen spot prices of oil negative for the first time. And now we're up, 60, 70, $80 range, right now. So a lot of volatility, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
It's a volatile world out there, Wally.
It's volatile, sure. And, I think, yes, there's volatility that is market-driven. There's volatility that's policy-driven. And, we're seeing in places like California, they're backing away from some of their policies. They're being more friendly now to natural gas than they were because they see that the renewables and batteries aren't available to keep the lights on. And let's just say that, a power outage here and there wouldn't necessarily inflame the populace, but California is well beyond that already.
Yeah. All right. In big news, state of New Mexico legislative issues going on. Cheryl Williams Stapleton has been indicted on 26 felony charges. It was originally reported as 28. I guess somebody just missed count in the midst of all the various charges. The report is that more than 24 felony charges, including racketeering and money laundering for her efforts to fleece the taxpayers of New Mexico and the children of Albuquerque public schools out of more than $5 million over a span of 15 years by diverting cash from contracts that she had with the state and put up shell corporations in order to get those, in order to divert the money to herself and her family. And it's really a sordid story. I hope, and we are going to definitely push for this in the legislature, in the media, that this kind of huge scandal is worth some really serious reform in Santa Fe. I'm not super optimistic that the Democrats in charge, and Cheryl Williams Stapleton was a Democrat. She was not only a Democrat, she was the second leading Democrat in the entire House of Representatives. Brian Egolf's right-hand woman there as the majority floor leader. Two of the reforms should be one, you can't be at a government funded, state government funded entity like Albuquerque Public Schools and work in the legislature, be a legislator. That's probably a bridge too far given the government dependency of New Mexico and the way that it benefits and behooves these big interests, whether it's UNM or APS or other school districts, to have these people in Santa Fe. But at the very least, they shouldn't be paid for the time off they take to go legislate. They shouldn't get their full pay from the school district or whoever their full-time employer is, and then also be able to take per diem. I think that is a very basic, and she was making $79,000 a year as an administrator at APS. So uh, any thoughts on the latest for Cheryl Williams Stapleton?
Well, and I do think it really does call into question many of the existing policies with regard to corruption and the ability to facilitate it in New Mexico. But I'm with you, particularly when it comes to having educators serve. I think that that's unlikely to happen right now. It seems as though I don't know. It's a close race between the enviros and the teachers union as to who might have the most power in the short term with regard to legislation. But yeah, I don't see that changing. But something needs to happen, and it's one of those things. Paul, big bureaucracies have tons and tons of rules to prevent this sort of thing from happening. But it's amazing how when people are involved, it seems like. It's I don't know. Is this a case of do we need more rules or do we need enforcement and do we need prudent business operations from the entities that already have enough rules like APS? So that's the other thing. But yeah, it's very disturbing what's happening and what is allegedly happened to Cheryl Williams Stapleton. Although, man, if I read the search warrant, and that is the most thorough search warrant. I haven't read the list of charges yet, to be honest. But yeah, it does not look good for her. It looks like there's a high likelihood of her being convicted. And what will it mean for reform? I don't know. Maybe nothing.
Well, we're going to find out, and certainly, I think this is a systemic problem in New Mexico. Not just the fraud and the illegality, which we know New Mexico has more than its fair share, but I think the population kind of expects this is the way things will be done in our state, and there's no reason that we should be tolerant of this kind of thing. Unfortunately, too many people are, perhaps even a majority, and um, yeah, what Manny Aragon did many moons ago was definitely unethical and problematic, and what Cheryl Williams Stapleton has done is also problematic. But I think it's more systemic, even here with this particular case. Not that what Aragon did wasn't systemic, but this is emblematic of, I think, a much bigger problem and one that needs much bigger solutions. So the Biden administration wants the IRS to know a lot more about your personal finances. Fun stuff. Yeah, we always love to talk about the IRS. And I saw this Forbes magazine article about the American Families Plan, and it perked up my attention because I'll read just a paragraph or so. The American Families Plan calls for banks and other financial institutions to report more than just a taxpayer's interest earned, capital gains, and losses. Banks and other financial institutions would also be required to report aggregate account outflows and inflows. In other words, the IRS will know about all of your bank accounts, whether you earned income on that account or not, and how much is in the account in a given year, how much was transferred in and out. This is not only a privacy concern, but I think it's going to be a compliance concern for banks because you're talking about massive amounts of data that these banks are going to have to report to the IRS. And there's no done deal here. The American Families Plan is one of many Biden priorities that hopefully will get squashed in the partisan wrangling in Washington D.C. But it's a real concern. One of Biden's big ways that he thinks he's going to come out magically with more money to help fund some of his huge boondoggle priorities in Washington is by really squeezing taxpayers more. And the last thing I think anybody wants is for the IRS to do more snooping in your personal finances. But this certainly would do that, Wally.
Yeah, no doubt about that, Paul. And, the thing that disturbs me about this is there once was a time that no matter how much you hated the IRS, I think reputationally they were above the political fray. They were tended to be apolitical. And in 2021 United States of America, where seemingly everything is political, the IRS has had its own political problems. And so, to give something like that now as an agency, at least even on that regard, the politics of how they operate, are they beyond reproach anymore? I don't think so. And do we want to give them all of this power? And then the other thing, a lot of these government entities and agencies, they make mistakes all the time. And when mistakes are made, sometimes it can cost you your livelihood and your career and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to clear your name when mistakes are made. So yes, this is a mighty big stick to give the federal government. And, I would definitely want to see some details and see lots and lots and lots of protections because, it's one of those things. It's like the more that data they have on you and the more that they can use it, the more likely they are to make mistakes. And that's assuming that their intentions are pure, above board, and apolitical. So,
which we know that is not the case. But I actually think this could create problems for enforcement because it's kind of like in a different context, of course, like 9/11, which of course we just passed the 20th anniversary of. One of the problems was that all these different entities, CIA, FBI, NSA, were all looking at massive quantities of data and trying to comb through it. And it's very difficult to find the needle in the haystack. And if you look at so much and have so many reports and so much information coming at you, it's pretty tough to actually figure out where the real problems are. And I just think this is more big government kind of anti-privacy scheming on behalf of the IRS, a power play, if you will, and it's not going to generate more revenue. It's not going to do anything that the federal government really wants while doing a lot to undermine individual freedom and privacy. Now, in the way of unintended consequences, let's put it that way,
Yep.
in state policy. Now, I want to be very clear that the Rio Grande Foundation supports the idea of lowering liquor license fees. The broad reform bill was, I think, overall positive. This is a bill we're going to talk about relating to liquor sales and liquor licenses and kind of opening that system up, a good old boy, very expensive system that had been in place in New Mexico for many years. And the law was passed in this 60-day session, so earlier on in 2021. But a provision was put into that piece of legislation by a very powerful senator, George Munoz, who represents Gallup and environs. And the idea was to stop alcohol abuse, or at least prevent more cases of alcohol abuse on tribal lands, and arguably you could say DUI as well. And that was the idea, that gas stations would no longer be allowed to sell liquor. And that's in McKinley County only. So Gallup, parts of the Navajo Reservation, and areas out in the western part of the state. So how do these gas stations react? Well, they don't keep selling gas and stop selling liquor. They keep selling liquor, which is a high margin, product, and gas is a low margin product. That's just the deep, dirty secret of the 7-Eleven down the road, or the Allsups, or the Chevron, or the Shell, or whoever you buy gas from. The gas is the loss leader. That is their way to get you into their little quickie mart to buy the icy, the slushy, the pack of smokes, the beer, the soda pop, whatever it may be. They're out earning not just on liquor, but on everything else that's sold in those little convenience stores. That is where they really earn their money. And George Munoz made an oopsie, I guess. I mean, we'll see. He may not want to correct this law, but it does appear, according to a recent report in the Albuquerque Journal, that a number of liquor store or gas stations out in McKinley County have decided just to become liquor stores.
Yeah, and then the one that they talked a lot about in that article, Paul, was one that was kind of a remote rural one, which didn't sell a lot of gas, but people whose gas tank was nearing the empty mark certainly were relying on it, and some of them were running out of gas near that. And yeah, you're right. It's like there's the standalone gas station does not exist to the best of my knowledge. And, I know it's go to Rio Grande Foundation's Facebook page and show me where they are. I mean, I'm sure there's one or two around, but I haven't not seen one in a long, long time. The ones
you'll have a better time finding the full service guys out with the squeegees and putting air in your tires.
Yep, there you go. So, yeah, it is interesting, and we talk about unintended consequences all the time, and here's a very large one. Yeah, it will be interesting to see whether on net this law is viewed to be a positive one. Getting rid of. And what's interesting, Paul, it was just hard liquor, wasn't it? It wasn't beer and wine. So, it's one of those things. If I remember back from my health class, I believe in 11th grade, I believe you can get drunk on beer and wine. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's
health class, huh, Wally?
Well, yeah, no personal experience with that. So it's one of those. That's another issue. Is that you drink a beer, you drink a glass of wine, you drink 3/4 to an ounce of hard liquor, depending on the proof, and they all have the same intoxicating effect. And so they didn't like the hard liquor. So yes, I don't know. I'm not in no way minimizing the impact of alcoholism and alcohol abuse in that part of New Mexico. But we just have to say, is this the best way? And we will see. But yeah, I don't know if I'm you wouldn't call me a fan. I am a student of unintended consequences, and this is one of the bigger ones that we've seen in a long time that came out just so blatantly. You didn't need a study to tease it out. It just happens right before our very eyes.
Yeah, the article in the Journal says that one gas station in McKinley County sells 80 gallons of vodka a day, which that's not minimizing the issue. There are serious issues in and around the Navajo res, and not just that res, but all parts of New Mexico and all parts of our country. But they made this gas station about $8,000 a day in hard liquor sales, but about $2,000 a day on gasoline. And you don't have to do a study, like you said, to kind of tease out what's going to be done by gas station owners and business owners and whatnot. Speaking of studies and economic impacts, Wall Street Journal published a chart, and it's based on Federal Reserve Bank data from the Atlanta Bank, data from the Labor Department, and it shows quite simply the earnings per hour adjusted for inflation. Now, the chart itself has an overall number and then a lowest quartile, so among the poorest folks. So the lowest 25% to be accurate. Now, at the beginning of 2020, this is presumably right as COVID is kicking off, the real growth adjusted for inflation of the lowest quartile of earners in the United States was growing by 4%. That is a fantastic rate of economic growth. Real incomes going up 4%. And we know that the economy was very strong when COVID took hold in March of 2020. That number started to ever so gently go downward. And, it was still in the positive for the rest of 2020. We're talking about, 2.5%, which I'm not sure that you can sustain 4% growth in a developed economy like the United States has. But it really is marked, the trajectory that growth in the lowest quartile, or reduction in the incomes of the lowest quartile, how it takes on that very dramatic drop, like a very scary roller coaster, going straight down as January of 2021 kicks off. And of course, Joe Biden takes office. The big spending plans are unleashed. And now we're underwater, not just with the overall, but with the lowest quartile of income earners. And so the point being that, yes, the economy was very strong, and especially poor people were doing poor. 25% doesn't mean poor, but the lowest income people in the country is a reasonable proxy for low income poor folks. And those people / all people in the United States are seeing their incomes whittled away dramatically by the force of inflation, which doesn't seem to be turning around anytime soon. Maybe it'll get back into the positive, but before I hand it over to you, Wally, I remember when just 3 or 4 short years ago, when the left's big cry was fight for 15. Now with inflation and the labor shortage, $15 an hour is pretty much what you're starting at in fast food joints and whatnot. So it's no longer a problem to get that $15 an hour wage. What is a problem is that $15 an hour just isn't worth what it was before, when you were actually talking about $15 an hour as a high minimum wage. So whatever you use for the target in dollar signs, it doesn't matter if you're not actually developing a pro-growth economy that's producing more and more goods for more and more people.
Yes, and Paul, being of my moderately advanced years, I was alive during the Jimmy Carter administration, and man, things were different back then in terms of car loans and the 12 to 15%. There was a lot of things in the economy that were very damaging and very detrimental. But the thing about inflation is it hits those that have to spend most of their income harder than those that are able to invest it and not have to spend their incomes. And we're getting on close to a year now of this inflation is just short term. So, so short term is certainly a year in this, but there are a lot of factors. A lot of times they'll take out the volatile energy and food sectors, for example. Well, that's all well and good to do. They are volatile, but they're very important, and as a percentage of the amount of money that's spent by poorer households, it's significant what you're spending for gasoline and food. The other issue is that we're seeing extremely high wholesale inflation, which means there may be a whole nother round of inflationary forces coming through. So yeah, this is a huge concern to me, Paul, and we're starting to see some nervousness in the stock market because of it. But I think as citizens and people who live and work and don't necessarily have tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars with which to invest during this inflationary economy, almost every American is quite a bit at risk at this. So,
yeah. Now we've just got a little bit of time left, but want to highlight an article from Sunday's Albuquerque Journal. It dealt with the new PED Secretary Steinhaus formerly of Los Alamos Public Schools superintendent. And I think broadly speaking, the problem with Kurt Steinhaus's approach and remarks, and they did there's a lot of ink spilled on the cover of these two stories about Steinhaus and his supposed efforts. And I'm not saying that he's not well intended, he's not trying to do the right thing, but this is a classic case of a politician, and I put him in that category, talking grandly about how they're going to do a bunch of things to change literacy and improve outcomes, but not being willing to talk a lot about specifics and how you're actually going to do these things. And it's not Steinhaus's fault necessarily. As PED secretary, Ryan Stewart had his own problems dealing with ultimately the political constraints imposed on him from Lujan Grisham and the unions. And I commend the articles to be read and looked at because they're interesting and they give an insight into what the new PED secretary says he wants to do. And it's not all bad. It just we're in 49th, 50th, depending on how you measure things. I didn't see anything in these articles, and I haven't seen anything in his other public pronouncements, and certainly nothing from Governor Lujan Grisham that is going to address the very real problems at New Mexico's schools.
Well, it's interesting. Back during the Martinez administration, as they're doing these education reforms, and the feds were very involved. One of the things that New Mexico got high marks on in their education reform efforts back then were we had high standards that we were going to try to achieve. Now, we weren't achieving them very well, but we had high standards. So is this another version of that? And then the other issue is I think why the details are going to be important is this is not we don't have a very decentralized approach to K through 12 education in New Mexico. It's very centralized. So if we had a more decentralized approach, you say, hey, maybe high goals, and you tell the local principals and teachers to get after it, and maybe that's all, you would measure it. That's all you would need to do something. But that doesn't seem to be how we do things here in New Mexico. And so, yes, hopefully at some point there will be some program coming forward about how we're going to do that. And again, Paul, I'm not against setting goals, having high goals, but I do think that at some point, unless there's a push coming from somewhere, are we going to see better educational outcomes anytime soon? And the answer is maybe we will. I certainly hope so, but would certainly like to see something more from what we're going to be doing on the ground to help achieve that.
Yeah, it's fine to have high aspirations and goals, but New Mexico has always had these challenges in education, and just keeping the system as it exists in place and hoping for better results has not been a strategy that has worked in the past, and I see no signs that it will. Of course, to be fair, Lujan Grisham's entire strategy is not geared towards student outcomes and their success. It's geared towards the unions and what they want. And what they want is dump more money into the system, but largely keep everything else intact, probably hire some new folks, and that's about it. So it's unfortunate, but that's the reality of education in New Mexico. Now, as we get on to the final few segments, the New Mexico United Stadium is still a topic of back and forth and will be through the election in November. KRQE did a story regarding a legal battle involving one of the proposed sites of the stadium at 2nd and Iron in downtown Albuquerque. There's a triangular lot owned by the Rail Yards Land LLC. The city's been trying to buy that piece of land since 2019, and the owners have basically said, not just no, but hell no. And I suspect that if not off the table, it would require a healthy premium in order to purchase that for the United Stadium. Now, God bless them. I mean, I don't know. Rail Yards Land LLC. Who are these people, and what was their game? Because if you go by the rail yards, yes, there's been a lot of time and attention paid by the mayor to the physical rail yards building, but this is not what I would call prime real estate as it stands now. Downtown Albuquerque, we know its challenges, and this is blocks or several hundred meters or yards away from being near downtown and being developed as such. So maybe these folks got in and said somebody's going to want to buy this little tract of heavily
This
industrialized
little slice
land.
of heaven,
Yeah.
right?
Slice of something. And so anyway, the land is not necessarily for sale on that. And then the other story, it's kind of but it required a front page story in the Albuquerque Journal and an editorial subsequently on that. I don't think there was ever any question though, but the PAC behind the United seemed to be indicating that the gross receipts tax dollars used to bond out the $50 million that are at least going to pay for part of the stadium, who knows how much of it, but part of it, that money could otherwise be used to hire police. Well, we'd said that from day one. And the Journal did break it down in an editorial here on Tuesday, September 21st, as a 20-year debt proposal. It would cost $3.2 million a year to the city in gross receipts tax revenue over 20 years. Now, that's not $50 million for those who astutely study mathematics. It's about $64 million.
I was going to say, yes.
And that's an indicator that this is a lot of money above and beyond. You're talking $14 million beyond that $50 million. That's debt financing, so that's not going to pay the stadium whatsoever. But $3.2 million a year over 20 years, you can hire a heck of a lot of cops for that price tag.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that's the interesting thing about money is it's a very fungible thing. If you don't use it for one thing, you can use it for another. And then this distinction about, this is capital versus this is operating. You know what? Bonding is just a way of turning what would be operating and turning it into capital, borrowing against it and dedicating that stream. So are those the only choices we have? No, I'm sure there's a myriad of others, virtually limitless. But, in a place like Albuquerque where seemingly the two biggest things on our mind right now are crime and homelessness on the one hand and soccer on the other. It's not surprising that those two got juxtaposed against each other and played off each other.
Exactly. Now, finally, our esteemed leaders here in Albuquerque have taken upon themselves with the most important urgency and using our limited resources to make bus fares on city buses free to the users. What a gigantic accomplishment for this city. And the sarcasm is intended. It is dripping. $3 million for the year 2022. It's a one-year experiment. Because always when you provide something for free, there's definitely a willingness to go back and then pay all of that $1 to get on the bus. Right. Now, that $3 million, just by the way, could have been used to hire cops too. So pick and choose your $3 million or thereabouts. But this was an 8-0 vote on Albuquerque City Council. Clearly, the city is charging too much in taxes because they have just gobs of money flowing through the city that are, being used for ultimate waste. So the idea that somehow it's a resource issue that they can't hire enough cops is the height of BS, for lack of a better word. This is a priorities issue specifically for Mayor Keller, but hey, for 8 city councilors, I don't know who is the one that did not vote yes on this particular boondoggle of free bus fare.
Yes, and it's one of those. When it comes to technology, there's the saying that free always scales. It doesn't always scale, but if something is free, it's much more likely to grow and scale. And the little thought experiment I did, Paul, is if something doesn't scale, that must mean there's an inherent flaw in that product from a usefulness, a utility point of view. Just consider what Southwest Airlines tickets, what kind of demand you would see for free Southwest Airlines tickets compared to free Albuquerque bus tickets, or free Rail Runner tickets for that matter. So yes,
don't give them any ideas, Wally.
But and they're so heavily subsidized, as you say. Even the ticket prices of both those transportation systems is just a very small sliver of the total cost, and still we're not seeing great demand. So will zero be enough to turn the tide? We will see. I do think it's admirable they couch this as a 1-year experiment, because places that have had free bus service without good law enforcement have had things like people riding the bus all winter long just because that's a warm place to be. Mm-hmm. They're not using it for transportation. They're using it as a form of their part-time or near full-time residence.
They're home.
They're home. There you go.
Yeah.
So very interesting to see. Again, 1-year experiment. Kudos for that. But I don't know what you do to make the buses all that attractive in New Mexico. I don't know. Will this do it? I say no, but we'll see. This thorough report a year from now that they bring
As
back.
you'd mentioned, bus transit number of riders had been, I think it's declined by something like 45% in just like last 5 or so years. The fare box recovery ratio was already on the order of 10%, which is about where the rail runner is. At least the buses aren't so capital intensive. You mentioned that earlier. The rail runner costs a heck of a lot to build as you're laying new rail tracks, and railroad or rail cars and train engines are much more expensive. The buses, as boondoggles go, are relatively inexpensive. And it's not that we shouldn't have a bus system, but wasn't it just a few short years ago with R.J. Berry as our esteemed mayor that we had a bus system rammed down Central because that was going to be so important to turning around this challenged area and really spurring economic development? Well, when you have demand for something, I know it's economics 101, you don't necessarily need to make that a free product. But here we are with so-called free buses, and it's going to be interesting. I just think the public safety issues and other problems are going to loom large. However, we shall see. It's Albuquerque City Council at its worst. And folks, there is an election in November. Early voting starts sometime around the first week of October. If you think this is dumb, just vote the bums out. So with that, thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or have your Google Home play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.